It is with great pleasure that I now welcome James Governor, the founder of Redmug and the author of the new book, Progressive Delivery, into the studio. We have a lot to talk about and I have a lot of questions to ask. But James, I'm going to start with the simple one. Is ChatGPT the new Netscape?
Well, I think the answer is yes, it could be. There is no doubt whatsoever that if we think about those seminal moments in the industry, when the entire industry changes, the arrival of Netscape on the scene and the Netscape IPO changed everything. That was the beginning of a revolution in technology, how it's used, consumer adoption and embrace of technology. It was just an absolutely seminal moment. The launch of ChatGPT had a similar triggering effect, particularly around consumer understanding that there was a new user interface for all of this information. And there was perhaps a new and what felt somewhat magical experience sort of hiding behind the curtain that we could now access. So I think that there is a similarity of pattern in terms of that ushering in, heralding a revolution. However, the company that kicks off the change is not always the one that benefits the most. And certainly from an economic perspective, there are certainly companies that have the opportunity to, with economics, I think a lot of the future of this AI revolution, great experiences aside, is going to be based on token consumption and token economics. And the entire industry at the moment is sort of running on empty. It's running on fumes. It's running on sort of these circular funding models. You know, I'll buy your chips, you'll invest in me. We've got companies, it's not quite clear who's going to pay the piper. And so from that perspective, I think that if we look at a company that like Google, for example, great year 2025 for them in terms of Gemini positioning, some breakthrough consumer things, you know, obviously the nano banana thing, sort of escaped confinement. On the multimodal side, Google is strong. Gemini is a capable model. Google just turned in an absolutely crushing set of results. It was looking for a while, everyone's not going to use Google anymore, they use Perplexity. Well, that's turned out to be bollocks. It turns out that Google can and will continue to be a destination for people that want an AI-enabled search experience. Amazon hasn't really gone anywhere. They are beginning to get their ducks in a row. And so I just think that from an economics standpoint, that's where, to me, OpenAI looks, the economics don't appear to make sense. And I think are you in control of your destiny? AI is a compute problem, but OpenAI is a software company. So they're reliant on other people's clouds. They are reliant on NVIDIA's chips. And they may create with Johnny Ive the greatest consumer product that anyone's ever seen. That may happen. But yeah, the economics look shaky.
James, so before I want to dive deeper into the economics of OpenAI and the relationship between the economics and the tokens that you mentioned. But I think I know the answer to this question. You obviously do not think that OpenAI and LLMs are a continuation from that Netscape moment. You think they warrant their own moments in the history of technology. Is that a fair statement?
No, absolutely. Yes, I do think that we're at a fundamental transformation. And the other thing about your question that excited me is that I'm old. And so, I sort of feel that I've seen things before. And I think what's really interesting is if we think about that sort of, Netscape 1995, the kicking off the change, initially it was about catalogs. It was literally, there were catalogs that we had access to. So you would literally, some, chap or woman on the internet was, here are the websites that you should look at that have been created about this subject this week. The sort of the Yahoo model where, it wasn't all automated. And everything was a catalog. It wasn't, and then, then we began to be like, well, hang on a minute. If it's a catalog, then we can sell things. So I think we've had the catalog, the chatbot, that moment, but where we're actually things going to get really interesting is when we begin to change and redefine business processes. We haven't begun that. So we don't know who's going to win that who's going to really win in that space? But yeah, no, I do think this is a fundamental shift and change in, as I say, how people access and utilize information.
Let me ask another question, James. Let me ask a follow-up. So for the benefit of our listeners or our viewers, the cost of tokens are plummeted. Is that correct?
Well, no, it's more that the cost of using tokens are skyrocketing.
The cost to who, though? The cost to who? The user, or the cost to
the cost to the user? So if we look at, for example, the first business process where we've seen fundamental and dramatic change is writing software. When we look around the industry now, there's no doubt that the industry is not as it was just 3 or 4 years ago. We're going to have to work through all of the change. But in 2022, if you went and tried to sell fancy autocomplete to a business, they say, we're not going to, we don't really want to pay $20 a month per developer. That's a lot of money for something that's just going to make them a little bit more productive. Here we are in 2026, and you've got developers bragging about using hundreds of dollars of tokens a day. If you don't spend, $800 a week, you're not going to make it. We're in this world of clearly tokens can make you extremely productive, but they are really expensive. And so just this question about how all that's going to work out. Now, the question about are costs going down? In some areas, they certainly are. So if you ask Jamie, what are the threat vectors for OpenAI? The Chinese are coming, right? So just as Elon Musk, seemingly he's going to pull out of the car market because the Chinese have beat him up there, the models coming out of China and the open source and open weights models are incredible. If we look at Quen, Kimi, and so on, there is the opportunity for a fundamental restructuring of a cost. But at the moment, if you look at the transformer models and the approaches that OpenAI is using, they're still running around saying we need $1 trillion to get to AGI, right? So somewhere between $1 trillion for AGI, which may or not happen, because are we really going to give every bit of money we've got in the world to NVIDIA? We might. On the other hand, there are going to be some other models emerging, and it has been. Well, one of the other problems is it's not entirely transparent how China is doing it, right? They will make claims, we didn't even have access to NVIDIA, so we did X, or there is some pretty grand scale geopolitics at work. It's in China's interest to make, and they are, but China has so many amazing engineers. They're doing things at incredible scale. And Alibaba and so on, they are capable of yes, to your point, changing the economics.
If the cost of tokens are going up for the users of OpenAI and Claude, when does that cost drop down to profit on the balance sheet for these companies?
Well,
where is the money going?
At the moment, it's going into NVIDIA, right?
So it all goes to, it's all plowed back to NVIDIA, and then NVIDIA do what with it?
Microsoft recently turned in a good set of results, absolutely crushed by the market, because the future of their cloud platform, they were saying, is going to be about 50% OpenAI. Now, Microsoft has historically been quite insulated against economic shifts because they have so many different kinds of customers. They have so many enterprise customers, they have consumers. They are not concentrated on one customer, and now they are. So what we've got is a sort of extreme concentration, and that sort of stuff is, I use the phrase jokingly, if you don't spend this much on tokens, you're not going to make it. There is a world in which OpenAI just runs out of money.
I think that world will come soon. If you look at history, whether you look at the speculative bubble that was blown up by Jay Gould in the late Victorian period, or the speculative bubble around web-scale application companies, or even just web companies, I'm certain that this is a speculative bubble. So who knows where the money's going? It is going round and round in circles, and the game is who will get out just before it bursts. However, in those other speculative bubbles, do you remember that one about the cables that went under the Atlantic that gave us basically free internet and free telephone calls and Skype? The infrastructure will be left. 100%. So when the bubble bursts, stuff will be left. Now, whether or not that's good for society, I mean, one of the things that really worries me is all of the battles in the next 20 years will be about resources, water, conflict minerals, and they're all getting plowed into data centers rather than back into our cities as drinking water, for example, in the example of water. Those concerns aside, I think the infrastructure will be left. Now, what we do with it, I don't think we'll reach AGI. I think that's a fantasy. I think that's part of the pumping. We keep saying AGI, 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 and the bubble gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, look, as you say, we have a bubble that pops, and then afterwards, companies emerge to fully take advantage of that outgrowth. There was a time when Amazon very nearly went out of business, but they made it. This, as you say, definitely looks like a historical speculative bubble. I think that's interesting because people are saying, oh no, there are actually revenues associated with it this time because people are prepared to pay the money. That is to some extent true. So, you've got Cursor pops up, hey, amazing, first company to 1 billion ARR. Look how quickly we did that. We're incredible. Replit is like, wow, look at this. It's not even a hockey stick. Just this absolute saturation curve. This is incredible. People are paying for stuff. But of course, what's the cost of goods sold? So people are paying the money, but then the cost of delivering that service, the cost to serve the customer is so high. I think it's very interesting that Amazon at the moment, their fundamental reshaping internally about how they measure developer productivity is using a metric based on cost to serve the customer, right? Cost to serve the developer. And they're thinking about everything in the value chain required to give a developer an experience, and an experience that then is delivered to the customer. And I think in this world of tokens and in this world of AI, that sort of stuff's going to be increasingly important. Google, just the other week, they're like, we've got a new Gemini Pro plan and Gemini Ultra plan. The Ultra plan, they're finally doing some really smart bundling. They've thrown in like, oh, with Ultra, you get YouTube Pro for free, right? So bundling is a great opportunity for the market incumbents. And I think, because Google, to my point, they've got their own model, they've got their own chips, they've increasingly got developer tooling, they've got a huge amount of money that they can invest. They are crushing it. So, and on the Amazon side, I think about control points. Yeah, okay. Do they have a state-of-the-art foundation model? No. But you've already said the Chinese are delivering, or we've already said are delivering extremely capable models that Amazon can build services around. What they do have is their own chip business, which is competitive, right? So Graviton, whilst it hasn't been using for model training, has been a huge success for them. Like about half of the Amazon build-out is now around Graviton. Low power, ARM-based, very, very capable chip architecture. And now they've got these Trainium chips. And I don't see any evidence that Amazon as an engineering company isn't going to get with Trainium to where it needs to be to, again, lower the cost of training models and moving forward. So yeah, I think there are some laws of physics. Yeah, okay. I put it this way. You're giving me the skeptical face, and I think that's very...
No, not at all. No.
But if we go back again, when ChatGPT hit, Microsoft looked like they were in the box seat. They had Visual Studio Code, they had GitHub, they had this relationship with OpenAI, everything was going to be amazing. You would have expected them to be emerging as the leader in this AI hyperscaler space.
Yeah. Don't forget, as late as 2015, Steve Ballmer was still saying AWS wasn't a real company. So how this all shakes out, how it looked 2 years ago and how it'll look 2 years from now, we can't predict, we can't say. I did not mean to give you the skeptical look. I was still processing the fact it's taken Google 30 years to work out how to bundle stuff together. They finally learned the lessons of Microsoft and Microsoft sales teams.
I know, it's unbelievable. To talk Obama, because Obama's the guy that literally one day went, hang on a minute, we've got this thing called Word. We've got this thing called Excel. We've got something called PowerPoint. Why don't we just smash them together and put a rubber band around the CD-ROMs? They were probably floppy disks at that point, and send them out to people and offer a discount, right? And yeah,
You
packaging and bundling, that's how to succeed in business. And yeah, I think Google's
you
doing some
cannot
interesting work there.
it it cannot be underestimated. If you look at Teams, it really is the biggest pile of shit that has ever been released into the universe. But its competitors, Slack, etc., do not have anywhere near the market share because every time a company needs to renew their Word license or their Excel license, the Microsoft guy are like, oh yeah, we'll do that for you dead cheap, but you got to take Teams. So the best products, we know this, of course, James, the best products don't always win. But speaking of the best products, let's talk briefly about these alternative models. We have the Chinese models you talked about earlier,
Yep.
and we've got Mistral right here in the European Union, of course, which we're not part of anymore. Can you speak something to those models? Are they potentially a challenge? And specifically, what would they mean to us as consumers? And what would they mean to us as businesses? Could I, for example, realistically use an alternative to the LLMs that have been developed in the United States?
I think at the moment the most capable third party models, I think I would say that from the American build out, you'd be looking at OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google at this point, right? I think the most interesting challenges to them are not coming from Mistral, actually. They are coming from the Chinese. That's where I see the clearest economic impacts. I mean, China, just the amount of engineers that China has and their proper investments in engineering and education are so far ahead that just in intellectual horsepower, never mind what they're doing in engineering and everything else. Yeah, they're going to continue to really, and they're strategic about it. They had an AI 5-year plan. They'll now have another AI 5-year plan. China is working very, very smartly on this side. And yeah, I think now geopolitics, they don't sell BYD cars in the US because, they think they can circle wagons, right? I don't think that works over time. And, it's not working with Tesla. They're now canceling models, as I've said. But on the geopolitics side, pretty clearly, Mistral as an EU company, there may be, we live in a world in which Intel is 10% owned by the US government, whilst Macron the other day was, saying we actually are investing quite a lot in AI. I'm not sure if he did the Davos style for sure, but does the EU feel under threat? 100%. Are they worried about relying on American infrastructure? For sure. Are they also prepared to work with China because of this American threat? For sure. But yeah, the EU is definitely gonna be investing more significantly in military, in tech, in AI. So I think there is some opportunity there. But no, we have not seen the most competitive models. But there are some European companies working in domains, but just on in terms of the biggest frontier models, we're not necessarily seeing that at this point.
Okay, James, we're going to switch gears now. We're going to talk about your progressive delivery. This is a fantastic book. Everybody's received it really well. Give us your elevator pitch and hold up, of course, the book if you've got it close to hand for the
I had it before.
benefit of the viewers.
Here we go. This is an amazing book that you should definitely read. Progressive Delivery, James Governor, Heidi Waterhouse, Kim Harrison, and Adam Zimmern. Here's the thing. One of the things you need to do in tech is you need to give things a name. You need a way that we can talk about a set of practices, a set of technologies. The industry needs these from time to time. And if we look at the sort of the transformational approaches, we went from waterfall, agile. We had DevOps, when Andrew Clay Schaefer and Patrick Dubois were like, hang on, there's something else at work here. And this notion of, really powerful ideas around like two pizza teams from Amazon, or continuous integration, continuous delivery. What we saw was that we're still trying to make the fundamental transformation. And a lot of this amazing work, particularly in the world of CI/CD, and look, there is no doubt that there was fundamental, phenomenal work in helping us become better at building systems and software. You can't sort of you can't ignore the work of people like Jez Humble or Martin Fowler with the whole sort of ThoughtWorks, and they're, helping people understand that there's a better way of building software. People like Nicole Forsgren helping us to understand how to build better software. But what I thought was interesting, and what the co-authors and I have sort of understood, was that some of that core thinking was pre-internet. So the idea, for example, if I'm going to do a canary deployment where I'm going to take some small amount of traffic and I'm going to take it a small set of users, I'm going to do a canary deployment where I'm instead of moving to all my infrastructure, I'm doing that stepwise fashion. The automation we've got to do that now is fundamentally different than it was pre-internet, right? The network routing that we've got as a possibility. If you want to do blue-green deployments, that was one of the really famous CI/CD sort of, you're like a blue-green, right? You had to have, when that book was written, we were back in you would have a load balancer, but you were going to have the same amount of infrastructure, God, at that stage, probably an Oracle database, BEA, WebLogic application server, Cisco network, hardware from Dell or HP or whatever. And you had to have two of them. That was incredibly expensive. The cloud completely changed all that. Why not have 5 different infrastructures and try 5 different things? Let's move to a more experimental.
And I want to pin you down on that one, James, because you've talked about automation, green, blue,
Yep.
and you talk about management practices around alignment and autonomy. However, in progressive delivery, you and your co-authors also speak about abundance. Can you shed a bit more light on what that might mean for our listeners?
Yeah, so abundance is an interesting one because at the moment in the US, there is a bit of a political, this guy called Ezra Klein is talking about abundance and is this left wing? There's a lot of arguments happening there. What we were talking about is cloud abundance is undeniably a thing. So, and it's funny, look at the conversation we've just had, and frankly, GPUs at the moment, it's true. There is a shortage. There is no doubt that we're seeing the AI is skewing things. The cost of memory is going up. But the cloud abundance is just the fact that I can have 1,000 servers, I can have 1,000 VMs, I can have as many containers as I want. In an instant, I can spin them up and I can bring them down again. That enables us to have new patterns and new ways of working that support this. If we've got incredible automation and we've got this abundance of infrastructure resources, right? Think about memory. Even if it is expensive, if we only need it for a short space of time, we can have access to that. So the cloud, in combination with very sophisticated automation, has created just new opportunities, new ways of working. And the companies in the world that are building software most effectively, that are software-driven organizations, they're the ones that have done this stuff, right?
And I was going to say, James, so I see a relationship between progressive delivery and the wonderful recent work of Ian Mile and his follow the money methodology. And this is my question to you. Is it possible for organizations to pull off progressive delivery and to go from thinking about scarcity to abundance if they don't restructure how incentives and essentially money flows around their organizations?
No.
Can it be done in a traditional setup, I think is my question.
No, I don't believe it can. And as I mentioned, 3 years ago or 2.5, GitHub was trying to sell Copilot and customers were like, why is it so expensive? $20 per user. If you save, how much time do you have to save on a developer's salary for that to actually be a negligible amount of money, right? So organizations are not, or no, you can't have the latest Mac. We're going to buy some crappy Dell machine for you to use. That's a bit unfair to Dell, actually. But, if you, let's just say,
Fuck them.
Well, that's a bit harsh. But let's just say you can have a standard Windows machine, or you can have what a lot of great developers want and expect, which is a really good Mac. You talked about running local models. You want, the latest Apple processors in order to do that and have a great experience for what you could do locally. So, what if as a developer, we'll talk about Clawbot next time. But if you are in a purely penny pinching mode and you haven't sorted out the economics and understanding, look, my business partner, and it's many years ago, wrote the book, Developers Are the New Kingmakers. If you are not thinking about how to enable this incredible asset to do better work, and now AI is a big part of that, you're just not going to be as competitive. So, and very interesting to me. I recently invited in to work with an e-commerce company. They're very successful, and they were like, we're in trying to encourage people to use progressive delivery. Went through this. They're not currently using feature flags. Feature flags is a fundamental underpinning. You want feature flags, you want observability in order to enable this better understanding of building the right service for the right user at the right time, putting users in charge of that, understanding the user experience. And they were like, well, we haven't built that into the platform yet. Well, you're going to have to, right? If you're talking about fundamental process changes, you need fundamental platform changes. The argument is that abundance and cloud abundance is one of the things that enables that, because that transition, I think with all of these changes, it's a culture change. You can't have a culture change without a platform change.
It's like I go on about in Visionaries, Rebels and Machines, which I thought was the main point of the book. We always think there are two things involved in computer programming, the computer and the programmer, but there are three things involved. And I really learned this from Garry Kasparov, the chess player. There's the computer, there's the programmer, and there's the process in which they interact. And I think fundamentally, you've absolutely just nailed it, James. If we do not create both the financial and technical infrastructure for a computer programmer to enter into that flow state, they'll never tap into that abundance. This is very difficult for lots of people to get their heads around.
You need all three. And I mean, funnily enough, to your point, I mean, we call our podcast, which is launching shortly, we're calling The Third Loop. And what that is we had dev, we have ops. Where's the user? Where's the bloody user? And progressive delivery is really about understanding, putting the user in charge sometimes. Like, why not give them the feature flag, let them decide? Because users don't always want new functionality. One of the things that users get really pissed off about, I mean, Apple's seeing that with its sort of Aqua interface at the moment. They're like, you move my cheese too much. So the opportunity to really involve the user in the process, you can't just have dev and ops, right? The true alignment has to be taking users on a journey and making them happy with the products that you're shipping them. And so, the third loop, we've had dev, we've had ops. The third loop is including users, and that's fundamental and foundational to the work we're doing in helping people understand progressive delivery.
James, on that happy note, let me thank you for coming on to the big interview this week. Progressive Delivery is now available at all good bookshops, and we are all looking forward to the podcast coming out. Now, to summarise very briefly, the question was, is ChatGPT the new Netscape? And our answer was...
Could be.
Could be. I thought it was absolutely. Could be. Watch this space. Thank you, James, and thank you all for listening today.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching Container Solutions TV. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube and follow Container Solutions on LinkedIn for cut down parts and weekly clips. If you want help with platform engineering, cloud native transformation, or you need to follow the money in order to change how you operate your cloud at scale, then visit our website using the links below and get in touch. We'll see you in the next episode.